Hey, my name's Dan Worrell, and this past Tuesday I was teaching at my church, Life Church Buffalo. On a Tuesday night, we have a Bible study, and I had the distinct honor of closing out the book of Genesis, which was super fun, and we spent 17 weeks kind of marching through the entirety of it. And it just came to me that rather than just wrap it up with simply the last few chapters of the book, I wanted to do a walkthrough of all that had transpired throughout the entire book as quickly as possible so that when we kind of put a pin in it, we had the emotion and the connection and the relationships in mind. So what I did was I created this, I'll show you in a second. But first I want to kind of introduce kind of a perspective on Genesis that I have that I think will resonate. The first really, it's God's story of creating, losing, and then seeking to redeem a people. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, I would judge it's a story about a family. Now, if in your heart you kind of go, "Aw, family," like you don't know the story of Genesis too well, because yes, there is love and connection, and those things are present, but mostly it's nuts. Like these families are incredibly complex and strained and difficult, and there's just so much drama. I kept making the joke on Tuesday that if this was running like a daytime soap opera, you dismiss it because it's overwritten. But that is exactly the kind of book that kicks off our Christian scriptures and the Jewish scriptures. It's incredible. So I want to walk through that at a pretty quick pace. So I'm going to be kind of going pretty fast. Hopefully this works out well with technology and such, and we'll have a look together. So kicking off, obviously, Adam and Eve's there at creation. God selects this couple to start off all the human race, and very quickly we have Cain and Abel, which Cain kills Abel. So first family, 4 people, one kills 1/4 of the other one. So super bad start. And then they have another child, Seth. Seth and Cain then kind of make up these 2 separate arms of families that march through the scriptures together. And you can see there's not only was there competition and hatred that led to death between Cain and Abel, as Cain hated Abel, but even between Seth and Cain, we see these families roll out with all kinds of interesting mimicking of names, which I think is significant if you look at it from a sibling rivalry kind of perspective. So Cain has Enoch, Seth has Enosh. Then Kenan and Irad, not so similar. Mahalalel, Mahulajel, Jared, Methuselah, Lamech, the other Lamech. So they're right kind of keeping in batch with each other. And then Cain has breaks off into these 3. Cain's lineage really continuously, though they're highly productive, they seem to have a lot of gifts with inventing, creating, making weapons, and understanding things that we consider technology today. There is this separation from the heart of God and living after his spirit, whereas that is at least more prevalent on the other side, though by the time it gets to Noah, God is looking at all of creation and saying, okay, this thing is jacked. These people have fallen away from me. They are filled with evil. So Noah is one of the remaining people with his children that God chooses to save. This blue line now is the flood, which we're all familiar with, of course. So he has 3 sons, and they bring their wives and kids. So it's kind of a whole batch. Get on this boat, and those are the ones that are saved, and all the rest get wiped out. And again, the drama kicks right back up because of these 3 sons, I have Japheth's kids here. These arrows mean that there's more in the scriptures telling about their lineage, but frankly, it doesn't really drive the point home that I'm making, but I want to include it so you at least know it's there. If you want to look it up in Genesis, you can yourself. So there's Japheth's kids and a whole lot of people groups there. And then there's Ham and Shem. Ham is the one who, when he sees his dad naked, let me back that up. His dad was drunk on wine naked, so he had just gone through the flood, seen all this trauma, etc., got himself blitzed and passed out naked in his tent. Ham sees his dad naked and goes to his brother and says, "Hey guys, dad's naked." Kind of dishonors him, discredits him, and it might seem like, okay, that's not cool, but a little bit of gossip, a little bit of inappropriate joking, it's not the worst. But in that time, there's only one father left on earth because all the rest have been killed off, and we're starting a whole new creation, and Ham stands out for this disrespect he shows his father, where the other 2 brothers kind of walk in backwards and lay a cloak over their dad to show him some discretion and protect his honor. So Noah, when he finds out about this, curses Ham. And that curse is actually not on Ham, but his son Canaan. So here you see Canaan and the Canaanites, which are this people group that is just butting heads with Israel throughout all of the rest of the New Testament. It all flows back to that one event. Plus, we have the people of Cush, which end up with Nimrod, who's the city of Nineveh, and the Assyrians, much, much later. So, whole lot of trauma, whole lot of bloodshed there. And of course, Egypt and Put being the lesser known of the four. But those contrast then the family of Shem, who has these 5 boys. We won't get into all the names right now. They're important, but we're kind of blitzing here. And Arphaxad has this long list of lineage that follows after him. The reason I kind of highlight the long list is because there are these moments in Scripture, even in just one book, Genesis, where there's long spans of time where God is just seeking and waiting. And finally, we roll. There's this man, Terah, who has 3 sons, one of whom is Abram. And Abram is the one that God chooses to call to follow him and set apart for a special people, a special family. I will compare it a little bit for 1 second, because over here we have Nahor, we don't really learn a whole lot about, but Haran has a son, Lot. So Lot is Abram's nephew. Haran dies, so Abram kind of becomes a bit of a de facto father of a sort, kind of looking out for him, taking care of him in Genesis a bit. Lot has 2 daughters, and when they think that they're abandoned and their mother's dead after Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a whole other jacked up scene, they decide, you know what, let's get Dad drunk and we'll sleep with him so we can get pregnant and keep the family line going. Totally messed up. And they have a son, Moab, and the other one has a son, Ben-Ami, which these are the Moabites and the Ammonites, which again are people of contention with the Israelites that are to come. So it's all a family affair at this point, and it's pretty impressive and pretty wild. So Abram and Sarai, you might know the story, but God says, hey, Abram, follow after me. I'll show you a land that I'll take you to. You'll have as many children as the stars in the sky and sand on the seashore. And Abram's like, all right, let's go. And he takes up his people and follows. Him and his wife do not have any kids. They're barren, and they do not have kids, and so they're much, much older. In fact, out of this promise, Sarah gets a little impatient and says, you know what? I got a good kind of workaround, kind of a loophole, if you will. What if you sleep with my servant, Hagar? And Abram's like, okay. So, doesn't fight back, but he sleeps with Hagar, and they have Ishmael. Now, as soon as Ishmael is born, Sarah gets jealous and gets all worked up and says, that's it, I hate them now. And Abram's like, okay, I guess you gotta go. Which is crazy that he basically lets them off to the desert to die, but God is there and with it and superintends this whole scene. And he says, I will make a nation out of Ishmael. And so Ishmael, later in the book of Genesis, is listed as having these 12 sons, which also become a nation. The second son listed is Kedar, which is, as history would note, the line from which Muhammad is born in 570 AD. So there's this whole lineage of the Arab people, which are the Ishmaelites, right, that flows back through Abram. And that is, we have a whole different religious tradition born out of Abram, frankly, not trusting God. And there's incredible conflict early in Scripture and still today. These things, boy, I get kind of caught up like, we say, okay, we're Americans. We're just as old as our thoughts are in our own lives. No, we're not. There are things that came before us that affect us. There's a spirit on us. There's ways and thinking and types and hurts, and we're not even aware of them mostly. And to become so takes incredible work and awareness of history and passage of time and reflection and prayer. There are things at work in the world that are older than our own lives. And that's certainly true with the sons of Abram, or who would become Abraham, Isaac and Ishmael. So let's jump over to Isaac. He, of course, is the son by Sarah, the eventual son of the promise that God had ordained. And Isaac has 2 sons, and of course, it gets all wacky. He prefers Esau, whose name becomes Edom. He's the father of the Edomites. But Jacob ends up supplanting and taking over the blessing from Esau, the otherwise firstborn. Both he tricks him with soup. He kind of sells his birthright for a pot of red stew when Esau is still a younger man, and his mom and Jacob conspire to trick Isaac into giving him the blessing, even though he thought it was Esau, as he was blind and old. So, rolling back down, we now have Jacob. This is where we're going to slow down a little bit and kind of unpack more some of the relationships, the names, and highlight some of the emotion and such of these families and connections, because it gets really, really thick. Clearly, as we zoom way out, there's already been a ton of drama. Going back to having two kids, one kills the other, the situations of brother against brother and sibling rivalry, and these curses that are born out and play out against lineages that fight and fight and fight. And it gets a little more personal, and the pacing slows down when we get to Jacob. Jacob, who's, again, one of the sons of Isaac, whose name would be changed to Israel, ends up having 4 women birth children to him. You might remember the story how he falls in love with a woman named Rachel, who ends up being his second wife, because Rachel's father tricks Jacob into sleeping with Leah, the elder sister, first. Leah is this heartbreaking story. The father sees her as maybe a daughter that wouldn't be as easy to marry off, so already she's discredited in her father's eyes. Jacob didn't want her, so now she's married to a man who never truly wanted her. And that is evident throughout the book of Genesis and how she names her children and how that relationship plays out. So we have Leah and Rachel, and then each of them, I guess kind of being competitive again, offer up a maidservant or concubine also to Jacob to have more sons, because there's this desire to populate, and there's also, I would suggest, this unhealthy competition between the two of them as sisters. So weird family dynamics going on. Let me slow down again. Leah. She is the first wife and the one that was not desired. She has 6 sons and 1 daughter. And this is really telling as you go through and read how and why she named them. The first, Reuben, means see a son, because the Lord looked upon my affliction. What affliction? Well, the fact that she's not loved by her husband. Next son is named Simeon. He has heard. And then she quotes, because the Lord has heard that I am hated. By whom? Again, by her husband Jacob. The next name is Levi, attached or joined. Now this time my husband will be attached to me. You hear the hope, you hear the, oh, surely now with 3 sons he will have my heart and I'll have his. The next one, Judah, means praise. This time I will praise the Lord. You kind of see her pull back a little bit and say, okay, let me focus on the Lord rather than my husband who's not returning my affection. Issachar means wages or reward. God has given me my wages. So you're kind of getting this hope that, okay, she's kind of stepping over to the Lord and not depending on that which is not dependable. And in the last one, though, she kind of reverts back. Zebulon means honor or dwelling. So she quotes, now my husband will honor me, which it seems he never quite does. And then they have a daughter named Dinah, who's key to the story in other ways we won't get to today. The other sister, Rachel, the other wife as well, has 2 sons, the first being Joseph, arguably the most famous of the sons, meaning may he add. Of course, Joseph is the one that kind of prompts the last, 10 or so chapters of Genesis along to facilitate his exit from the family to Egypt, to do all the work that he did to become the number 2 in all of Egypt. But it's not work that he did so much as faithfulness, as God moved him through incredibly difficult circumstances to arrive at the place where he could save these lives. And Benjamin, again, rather tragically, was a brother that Joseph had never met as a child because he was 17 when he was sold off into slavery. But when Benjamin was born, it in turn killed his mother Rachel. So that is the very love of Jacob's life dies when she is delivering her son Benjamin. Originally, the name was to be Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow, because she knew she was passing away. And Jacob changed it to Benjamin, because he did not want that moniker on his son. The other 2 concubines or maidservants, they're of some import, but a little bit less than the sister relationship, which spans back more chapters. Bilhah, which is the servant of the loved wife of Rachel, has two sons named Dan and Naphtali. Dan means judged, or he has judged. She quotes, God has judged me. And Naphtali, my struggle or wrestling. With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister. And you can see how she's in this competitive state as well. And then lastly, Zilpah seems to be kind of the happy one of the bunch because these children are kind of named accordingly, where Gad is good fortune or luck has come, and Asher means happy or blessed. Also my son's name, incidentally. Happy am I, for women have called me happy. So of the four, there's really only this one of the four that isn't just steeped in tragedy. And then we'll just jump down one more generation because Joseph's two sons end up being promoted to be as sons. It's a little confusing. Their two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. A lot of importance in the names there, but we won't get too into it. You can read it if I zoom in a little bit. You can have a look. But when Jacob is old in age and reunites with his son Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim are Joseph's sons, and he says they will be as my sons because he knows he's going to have this nation formed out of him. So rather than Joseph getting a portion, he instead gets two portions. So each Manasseh and Ephraim get an equal portion as the other sons, not of Joseph, but of Jacob. So they almost get bumped up a generation in terms of honor and prestige, which is why those two names, Manasseh and Ephraim, are tribes in Israel today, as are all of the remaining ones. The only sons that do not get a quote-unquote land grant as Israel develops, mind you, in 400 years, is Joseph, because his two sons split the blessing, and Levi, who rather get appointed sanctuary cities because they are the people of priests and they get a tithe from all the other tribes to the cities that they are in, and it operates very differently. They have a very special role unto the Lord as priests, and that's where the priestly line comes from. So a lot more happens in Genesis. There's a whole lot of things I'm skipping over. The development of miracles and dreams and God provision and hand in it. And it's so important. And I feel terrible that I'm not getting into those details. But I wanted to highlight a family because really when you think of Genesis, that is the backbone, the skeleton of whom and what God uses. He uses this family line to begin a nation. But there's really hardly any awareness other than these promises of that nation when Genesis ends. Rather, it picks up in the Exodus that after 400 years of slavery, they will be led out to the land that will be shown them, and the nation of Israel, as we know it more as a nation, is born. So that is the book of Genesis. Beautiful, beautiful beginning. Also a heartbreaking, twisted, familial, dramatic, comedic, over-the-top, tragic story of a lot of lying and backstabbing and cheating and grudges that go on for seemingly forever that we can, I hope, relate to, that God uses people such as these because, well, we know he uses people like us, and we fit right into that mix, don't we, sometimes? So I hope this is a blessing. I hope it can be used for some good by his hand, and I hope you have a great time in the Word.